Welcome to Miss Susan's musical instrument categories. So many instruments to choose from. It's so overwhelming. How will I ever choose one instrument to make my own? Which one's my favorite? There's so many and they're all so different. Help! Don't worry. We can use things like the different characteristics that the instruments have to sort them into groups or categories. We could classify them by type, or by trait, or by similar properties the instruments might have. We could ask ourselves questions like, in which category does this instrument belong? Which characteristic of this instrument makes it belong to this group? What is the instrument's mode of sound production? What type of materials is the instrument made of? What qualities or characteristics does the sound of the instrument have? Which instruments share similar properties? We group together instruments with similar properties. We sort them according to their traits, features, or qualities. Let's look at some musical instrument categories or families. Let's take a look at the string family first. Can you see any similarities or similar properties that all of the instruments possess? Right. The obvious one is they all have strings. In fact, in addition to all having strings, there isn't that much more that all of the instruments have in common. The violin, viola, cello, and double bass all have the same type of shape, but they are very different sizes. They are all made out of a similar material, different types of wood. Even the harp has a frame made of wood. But each instrument also has something that makes it different and possibly means that it could be put in a different category if we look at instruments differently. Let's look at the brass family. Nice and shiny and loud. What traits do you see all of the instruments having in common? You might have said they're all made of a shiny metal called brass. They all have a bell shape at the end of the tube. And if you look closely, they all have a special mouthpiece that's made of a different metal inserted into the opposite end of the tube from the bell. But there's where the similarities stop. Let's look at things like the length of the tube. The trombone has a tube that gets slid out for a lower note and pulled back in for a higher note, and it has no buttons. The trumpet has a relatively short tube, which can be made longer or shorter by pushing the buttons. The tube on the tuba is quite long. It's also much thicker and wider. And the tube on the French horn is the longest tube in the entire brass family. Let's look at the woodwind family. This one's an interesting one because there are a lot of similarities and a lot of things that make the instruments different from each other. What can you see that is a common trait among all the instruments in the woodwind family? It's a hard question to answer because there really isn't one thing they all have in common, other than the fact that they use the wind from the player to produce a sound. The recorder, the flute, and the piccolo only require blowing from the musician, but the oboe, bassoon, clarinet, and saxophone require a specific type of blowing over a wooden reed of bamboo. Now it's time for the percussion family. So many instruments in the world can be put in this family, and some of them are very similar, and some of them are very different. What qualities do these instruments possess that would cause them to be put into the same classification or the same category or family? That's right. In one way or another, every single instrument in this family gets hit. Ouch! They either get hit with sticks or mallets or your hand, or they get hit by materials inside themselves, and the material gets shaken and hits the walls on both sides. But when we look at what traits each instrument has, we start to see that the materials that the instruments are made of are very different. The way they are played is very different. The sizes and shapes are incredibly varied. Now we've arrived at the keyboard family. These instruments belong in the same classification or category because they all have some sort of keyboard on the instrument. Other than that, they have so many differences. Some are powered by your fingers pushing down on the keys. Some of them additionally require air to be blown through the instrument. Some of them actually require pumping by your feet, and some require electricity. We also have a lot of electronic instruments. This family could include a synthesizer, or an electric organ, or the theremin, or even an electric guitar could be considered an electronic instrument. We group together instruments with similar properties. We sort them according to their traits, features, and qualities. Let's have a lightning round quiz. I'm going to shout out the name of a musical instrument, and I want you to respond as quickly as possible with the name of the family that instrument belongs to. Ready? Here we go. The tuba, brass family. The clarinet, woodwinds. The bass drum, percussion. The guitar, string family. The synthesizer, electronic instruments. The piccolo, woodwinds. The tambourine, percussion. The accordion, keyboard instruments. The violin, string instruments. The trumpet, brass instruments. The cymbals, percussion instruments. The bassoon, woodwinds. The trombone, brass instruments. The cello, string instruments. The maracas, percussion instruments. Last one, the flute, woodwinds. Great job! In part 2 of this series, things are gonna get mysterious. The families aren't as clearly categorized as you think. Wink, wink. See you there.